Chapter 41 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Dhruva's Tapas. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the banks of the river Yamuna, at the holy spot by name Madhuvana, Dhruva began to perform the penance as taught by Narada. For the first month he lived on the fruits which were found in the forest. The second month he sustained himself by eating grass and dried leaves. The third month only water held his life in the body. During the fourth month he denied himself even that. The air he breathed was the only food he was taking. He was bent on only one thing, the mantra which he had learned from Narada. Mentally, he repeated the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And this was all that mattered to the child, who was hardly 5 years old. The Devas found his tapas too terrible. They tried to bring out obstacles to his concentration. Wild animals and serpents and even evil spirits were sent to frighten the young child. But he heeded them not. So intense was his absorption that he did not even know that they were there. He was intent only on his tapas. The three worlds began to tremble in fear because of it, and the Devas at last went to Narayana. They said, Lord, never has this happened before. All living beings are finding that they cannot breathe because Dhruva is intent on his tapas. Please have mercy on us and stop this penance. Narayana said, I will now go to him and make him desist from this tapas. It has lasted 5 months. I must bless the child who is my bhakta. Narayana came to the banks of the Yamuna. Dhruva found his heart suddenly bereft of the image of the Lord which he had been seeing all these days. He was roused from his samadhi, and when he opened his eyes, Dhruva found the Lord in front of him. The child was overcome by the suddenness of it all. He looked at the form of the Lord as though he would drink him with his eyes. He held out his arms as if to embrace the Lord. His eyes were raining tears, and his face was wreathed in smiles. He fell at the feet of the Lord and stood up looking at him, and still he kept on looking. His lips moved, but he could not speak a word. So he stood for a while. Lord Narayana knew what the child wanted. Dhruva wanted to praise him, but he could not, since he did not know how. He knew not the words, and so Narayana gently touched the young boy's cheek with his conch, which was snow white and which is said to personify the Vedas. The moment the conch touched his face, Dhruva became enlightened. He became articulate. His words were those of rishis when they talk of the glories of the Lord. Dhruva said, I salute you who entered into me and gave me the power to speak. My Lord, my power of speech was asleep and you gave it an awakening. You pervade the indriyas, the sense organs, and with your power, you give them life. You are the one truth. You create the illusion, Maya, and you the creator of the Mahat and Aham Tattvas. You have created the three gunas and the presiding deities of the indriyas, and you enter these, all of these, and remain in them like fire residing inside the Arani. People who do not know the truth about you think this Maya to be others other than you. Brahma was granted the vision which made him see the world like a sleeper viewing the dream from which he is awakened. How can anyone forget you, who is everything? You will rid man of births and deaths if he worships you. If ignorant men worship you and ask favors of you, favors like the gratification of small desires, then that man is really unfortunate, since he has been well and truly deceived by Maya. Having seen you who is the Kalpavriksha granting immortality, if a man asks for pleasures enjoyed by the mortal body, is he not the most unfortunate amongst men? The ecstasy which one experiences by thinking on you and by listening to stories about you, stories related by your bhaktas, is even greater than the Brahmi state which is nothing but bliss. As for ordinary mortal men who exist for pleasure only, he is like one sailing in a chariot which has been hurled suddenly to the earth by a sweep of the sword named death. He will never know the ecstasy of knowing you. When even the Brahmi state cannot equal the joy achieved by the thoughts of you, do I have to mention the unfortunate condition of men who live in the world of pleasure, thinking it is great joy, and who die when their time comes, like dry leaves falling from a tree? Please grant me only this, that I will think on you night and day, and grant me the company of noble souls who are your bhaktas. In the company of such people, listening to your glories all the time, I can become drunk with joy, and so I can cross this fearful, pain-filled ocean called birth and death without any trouble. When a man becomes happy in the company of your bhaktas, he will not think of this perishable body of his, nor about those who are dear to him. His wife and his children and his house, wealth and belongings mean nothing to him. As for me, I have been granted a sight of this, your form, but I am not able to comprehend your form as the Ishvara, the cause of the cosmos. It is therefore evident that my mind is not completely free of desires. I am not seeing the form of you, which is sleeping in yoga trance after the great deluge. The entire universe is withdrawn into you, and your bed is Ananta, the other form of time. One of your navel is born Brahma. I imagine that form of yours and prostrate before it. I am still the Jivatma and you are the Paramatma. You are pure and the Jiva is not. It is tainted with desires. You are knowledge and the Jiva is ignorance, avidya. You are life and Jiva is inert. You are imperishable while the Jiva suffers under the delusion that it is ever undergoing change. You are the ancient and the Jiva is fated to have births. You control the Gunas, but the Jiva is their slave. I salute you who are the Brahman, the Purusha, the cause of this universe. Narayana was pleased with his young worshipper. He said, I know what made you take upon yourself this difficult task. I will grant you what you wanted then. I am assigning for you a place which is eternal. I have decided to place you so that the sun and moon will revolve round it, which will be circumambulated by the 7 rishis. The stars will wheel round you. Your father will crown you king after he renounces the kingdom and goes in search of peace. You will ever be devoted to me and to my bhaktas. In their company will be spent all your time. You will rule the world for 30,000 years. You will perform many yagnas, and finally you will see me again. You will reach me ultimately. The Lord vanished from his sight, and Dhruva was left alone, living the moment over and over again and again in his mind. The young child thought of returning to the city ruled by his father. He was glad in a way, but his heart was not quite elated at the turn of events. He told himself, I have seen the Lord. Narayana and his presence blessed me. I attained the joy which even rishis like Sanaka and Sanat Kumara have not attained. Fool that I was, I did not ask for moksha. It is just my misfortune that my mind was clouded. Sage Narada spoke rightly when he said, this is not the age to take insults and applause to heart. I was foolish to have disregarded his words. The Lord has granted me a boon far inferior to moksha. I should have asked for release from the bondage called life on earth, but I did not do so. My ego evidently is not completely destroyed, and so my mind became clouded. I became a beggar and I am ashamed of myself. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Chapter 42 of Shrimadbhagavatam, The Constant Star. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. After he had spoken to Dhruva, the sage Narada went to the palace of Uttanapada. When he had been welcomed properly and given a seat of honor, Narada addressed the king. Why do you look depressed? Has any calamity befallen you or your kingdom? The king sighed deeply and said, I have been heartless. Obsessed as I have been with my love for a woman, I allowed my young son of 5 to be driven away from me. He is wandering about in the forest. Will he not be hungry and thirsty? How can his tender form bear the difficulties of living in the forest? He will surely be eaten up by the wolves and other wild animals in the dreadful forest. He wanted to sit on my lap, and my blindness was so much that it prevented me from letting him do so. Hurt by my indifference and by the cruel words of my wife, the poor child has left me and gone away. Are you surprised then that I am depressed? Narada smiled at him and said, Please stop mourning for your son who is protected by Narayana himself. Your son will be the greatest among men. You do not know the greatness of Dhruva. Now, nor are you aware of the future of this child as you call him. Your son will achieve what the Devas have not been able to, and because of him, your name will live in the world forever. You will be known as Uttanapada, the father of great Swami. Do not worry. Dhruva will come to you very soon. 5 months passed and the king was impatiently marking time. News reached him that his son was returning from the forest. With the entire city following him, the king went out to receive the young boy. Suniti and Surichi were with him, and Uttama, the younger son of the king. Dhruva reached the outskirts of the city, and the king spied him from a distance. Jumping out of his chariot, Uttanapada ran to his son and embraced him with tears in his eyes. Dhruva fell at the feet of his father and of his mothers. Surichi embraced him, and with her voice faltering because of emotion, she said, May you live long. Years passed. The king installed Dhruva as the king and abandoned the kingdom for a life of penance in the forest. Years later, after ruling the kingdom wisely and well, and after performing several yagnas and Ashwamedha yagas, Dhruva realized that he had ruled the earth for 30,000 years. The words of the Lord had always remained in his mind, that after 30,000 years of doing his duty as a king, he would be free to seek comfort at the feet of Narayana. Dhruva, with a smile of happiness at the thought of his imminent freedom, installed his son on the throne and went to Badarikashrama to perform tapas. He was impatient to shed the earthly body which was confining his Atman. He was immersed in yoga as he was years ago. He was blind and deaf to everything around him. A glowing chariot reached his presence, and out of it came divine beings who were the servants of Narayana. He honored them, and they said, Years ago, when you were a child of 5, you prayed to the Lord, and he granted you a place in the heavens, a place higher than that of anyone except himself. Even the sun and the moon and the stars and the 7 rishis will make pradakshina to you, and they will never reach your eminence. All the other stars and planets will alter their course in the heavens, but you will be constant, never swerving from your place. Please enter the chariot and reach your appointed place. As he was about to enter the chariot, death came near Dhruva and bowing to him said, My lord, please accept me. Dhruva said, I welcome you. And placing his foot on the bowed head of death, Dhruva entered the chariot. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnar Pranamastu. Chapter 43 of Shrimadbhagavatam, The Birth of Vena. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Utkala was the son of Dhruva. He was a great philosopher. Even when he was young, he had reached the Brahmi state. He did not care for the throne and the pomp and splendor of the royal court. In fact, he looked He took so little interest in the ruling of the kingdom that people mistook him to be ignorant and dull. He did not bother about his appearance, and those who looked at him would not pay him any respect. Finally, the elders of the city thought that he was not in the least efficient. They crowned his younger brother Vatsara as king. One of the descendants of Vatsara was a king by name Anga. He was a Rajarshi, and once he performed the Ashwamedha. At the end of the yaga, the Devas are supposed to come to receive their share of the Havis. But when they were summoned by incantations, the Devas would not come and receive their dues. Everyone was surprised, and they asked the Yajamana, the king. They said, "O king, the Devas have not appeared to accept your oblations into the fire. We can assure you that we have performed the yaga without any mistake being committed. There is no fault on our part. We do not know why the Devas have not come." The king was sorely distressed. He addressed those who had assembled there. "You are all wise men, and you all wish me well. The Devas, as you have seen, have not responded to our summons. Can anyone tell me what my fault is? What has been committed that should not have, in a situation like this? I do not know why it has happened. Can no one find out the reason why?" The wise men spoke. They said, "O King of Kings, you are not to blame in the performance of the yaga. We know the reason for this. You are a man of great virtue, no doubt, but you have not been sinless in your previous birth. As a result of that, you are childless. We will try to help you. You can perform another yajna with the purpose of getting a son. Lord Narayana will be worshipped, who will be so pleased that he will himself gratify your desire. When they see that Narayana himself is pleased to bless you with a son, the Devas who will be with him will come to you and receive their share of the Havis." They took it upon themselves to perform a yajna which was to honor Narayana. When the yaga was coming to an end, out of the fire rose up a form wearing golden ornaments, and in his hand he held a vessel made of gold. He held it out to the king, who found divine payasa inside it. With the blessings of the elders who had assembled there, the king smelt the payasa and gave it to his wife Sunita. In course of time, a son was born to the king. This son, born of the sacrifice, was, however, the abode of adharma. Even when he was a child, he enjoyed hurting living beings. As he grew older, he would go into the forest to hunt. But he was bent on hunting at will and on killing gentle and harmless animals. He was so cruel that people would avoid him. When he appeared in sight, men would say, "Here comes Vienna, the cruel prince," and run away from the spot. While playing with his companions, he would kill them without any compunction. The king tried his best to bring him round to the right path. He tried all the 4 methods, Sama, Dhana, Beda and Dhanda. But it was of no avail. He was unable to change the nature of his son. The king was very unhappy. He told himself, "God is kind towards those who have no children, because they are not unhappy as the result of the atrocities committed by a bad son. Because of being the father of a bad son, a man inherits infamy, hatred of all man, and endless mental pain. The really wise man will never desire to have a son when the entire house and the family and the country is unhappy because of this one bad son. But when I think of myself, I feel that God has been really good to me in giving me a bad son instead of a good and well-behaved one. Because of the unhappiness caused by this son, I have become disgusted with my home and my very life. I dare not move about in the presence of good men, burdened with the sin of having produced this son. A good son would not have left his father adopt the path of renunciation so soon. I would have been bound to my family, and this bondage has been severed because of the behavior of my son. The king was very unhappy. No one could talk to him since he was drowned in his own misery. One night, he was tossing to and fro sleeplessly on his bed. Suddenly, he made up his mind. The poor, unfortunate King Anga abandoned his bed and with it his home, his wife, and all the things of this world. He walked away quietly from the city, never to return. The subjects were grief-stricken at the departure of the king. They knew that the son's sinfulness had made the father adopt this course. King Anga had gone in search of peace. The ministers and other wise men of the city went on a deputation to the rishis and asked them for advice. They said that a kingdom had to have a king, and so much as they disapproved of him, the ministers had to crown the wicked Vena as king. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnar Pranamast. Chapter 44 of Shrimadbhagavatam, The Rule of Vena. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There followed a reign of terror. Bad as he was already, Vena's behavior became incorrigible after he became king. He was drunk with power, and the immense wealth of the kingdom served only to enhance his arrogance. He had no respect for the elders, and he made it a point to insult them whenever he could. He won the reputation as the most arrogant, cruel, and heartless king that ever sat on a throne. He gave orders that there should be no sacrifices, no homas, no yagas to be performed anywhere. The wise conferred again and considered ways and means to stop this anarchy. It was daily getting worse. They were caught on the horns of a dilemma. If the king were to rule the country as he was doing now, the subjects would not be able to bear it much longer. On the other hand, if there was no king, robbers and highwaymen would raid the country, and again the subjects would suffer. Vena had been made king since it was imperative that there should be a king. It was known to all that he was unfit for the task, but they never bargained for this state of affairs. He was the cause of fear for everyone. They thought they would try and see if it would be possible for someone to instill some sense of duty in him by talking to him seriously about it. They were responsible for his becoming king, and so they felt that it was again their responsibility to try and rectify the fault. The ministers went to the rishis, and they agreed to do their best. They went to the presence of the king, and suppressing with difficulty the anger which was uppermost in their minds, they spoke to him in soft and gentle words. They said, "Dear son, please listen to our words carefully. Your life, your wealth, and your good name are all involved in danger. Dharma, when practiced with purity of mind, thought, word, and deed, will lead to greatness. This adharma which you are practicing is not good, either for you or for your country. You should protect your subjects and not harass them. The king who does not worship righteousness or God is doomed to hell. You should perform yajnas and please the gods. On the contrary, you have stopped them from being performed. You are acting wrongly. Take our advice. Improve your ways. Even now it is not too late. There is hope of prosperity for the subjects and salvation for you if you listen to us. Abandon this type of rule and be good to all." King Vena turned a deaf ear to all their pleadings. He said, "You are the ones who are following the path of adharma and not me. You worship another god instead of me who is your protector. The king is the image of God, and he should be worshipped as God and no one else. All the celestial beings find a home in the body of a king who has been anointed, and it is but right that I am the one to be worshipped. I am Narayana in person, worthy of the highest honor. People who do not know this truth will go to hell and not myself. You are like women who are unfaithful to their lords. Who is this Yagna Purusha? Whom are you talking about? He is the king. Hereafter you must perform yagnas in my honor, homas for me and sacrifices in my name. No one else is worthy of worship except me, your king. The rishis were horrified by his words. They looked at him for a while and they thought of the future of the country with this tyrant on the throne. The anger which they had been hiding inside their hearts flared up at the words of Vena, and they could not brook the insults hurled at them. They thought to themselves, this man deserves to die. He equals himself to Yagneshwara Narayana, and he has thus sealed his own fate. He has already been killed by the Lord for his arrogance. We will have to destroy him for the sake of protecting his subjects. With their minds, they invoked the god of death, and Vena was dead. The rishis went back to their ashramas without looking back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnarpanamastu.